So the question is, how can homeschooling parents avoid the problem of sheltering their kids too much? Now, I'm sympathetic to this concern because my wife and I actually homeschool our kids, so we understand the concern and the desire to shelter our kids from things that are harmful in this world. Now, I think, though, oftentimes that in our attempt to try to shelter our kids, we actually end up doing more harm than good. Now, to be clear, I don't think that we should avoid sheltering our kids from everything. I think there are some things that are legitimate to shelter our kids from. So, for example, sheltering your kids from gangs or from drugs or from violence are legitimate things to try to shelter our kids from. As a real case example, my parents were born in Baghdad, Iraq, and during their life in Iraq, they realized this was probably not an ideal place to raise kids. There was revolution after revolution, there was wars constantly going on, and my parents said, hey, look, we want to shelter our kids from this war zone. So they decided to move to the United States in the late 60s, and as a result, I got to grow up in the United States, and I was sheltered from that war zone. So there are certainly things, and probably other things that I haven't mentioned, that are legitimate things to want to shelter your kids from. However, there are some things that I think are appropriate for us to expose our kids to. Now, when it comes to sheltering our kids from bad ideas, this is an area where I think we have to be more careful. And I want to suggest to you one way that we can avoid this problem of sheltering our kids too much. Now, there's probably many different answers that we can give. I'm just going to give one answer that is a little bit broad and give an example of what this looks like. And here's the principle. We need to inoculate, not isolate. Again, we need to inoculate, not isolate our kids from bad ideas. And here's what I mean by that. Oftentimes, we tend to want to isolate our children from false ideas that we think are hostile to the Christian worldview. And this is a problem because what happens is when we isolate our kids from false ideas, we tell them maybe the names of the false ideas, and then we sort of make fun of them, or we don't give them credit. We don't teach our kids why people believe these false ideas. And as a result, they become isolated from these ideas. And here's why this is a problem. Here's why it's dangerous. When our kids then run across a real person who holds these false ideas, they're completely unprepared. Let me give an example of this. Take the issue of evolution. Many times, Christian homeschooling parents will tell their kids about evolution. And they'll say, oh, evolution is a false idea and it's a bad idea. And instead of teaching them why people believe in evolution, all they simply end up doing is mocking the idea. They'll say, oh, that's ridiculous. How can you say that we evolved from apes? Which, of course, evolution doesn't even teach that we evolved from apes. But that's a different story. And they'll ridicule the idea. And in conversations over dinner, when the subject comes up, we'll just make fun of the idea and say this is ridiculous. And we won't end up teaching our kids why some people might actually end up believing in evolution. And in fact, if anything, we might say some Bible verses, and we'll throw Bible verses at the subject as if like Bible verses are rocks. So we'll say, well, the wisdom of this world is foolishness to God, ha ha ha. As if by saying those things we can just move the issue of evolution out of the picture. Well, this just simply leads to isolation. And then when our young kids run across a real evolutionist, what they find out is they're completely caught off guard. The evolutionist actually has evidence from science and philosophy explaining why they believe evolution is true. They might bring evidence from geology and paleontology and other things. And all of a sudden, our young students are like, what's going on? I didn't know that there's so much evidence for evolution. And so they might survive barely with their faith intact, but forget about them having any impact for the cause of Christ. So instead of isolating our kids, we need to inoculate them. We need to inoculate them with bad ideas. And here's what this looks like. If you think about inoculation when it comes to the issue of medicine, how do we inoculate against the polio virus? Well, we take the polio virus, either a dead form of it or a very weakened form of it, and we insert it into the body. And what the body does is it says, oh, wait a minute, hey, we have this foreign virus in our body, and so what our body does then is it creates antibodies. It creates cells that are like an army to destroy the polio virus. That way, when you go out into the world and you go to India or Africa or wherever the polio virus is more common, and you get exposed to the real polio virus, your body says, oh, hey, I've seen this before. It's polio. And now here is the army of antibodies and cells that I have prepared to destroy this virus. And so that way, you don't get the actual virus of polio. Well, the same is true when it comes to the inoculation of false ideas. We need to teach our kids false ideas enough so they understand why people believe them, what are the reasons for people holding to things like evolution, for example. And so that way, when our young people run across a person who is an evolutionist, here's what happens. The evolutionist will say, hey, you know, you're a Christian? Well, let me tell you why you're mistaken about your views, because evolution is true, and here are 3 reasons why evolution is true. And then here's what our Christian students or our young people say. They say, oh, yeah, I've heard of these 3 reasons why evolution is true. Let me give you 2 more why evolution is true. Of course, the evolutionist is then surprised. Wait, a Christian has additional reasons why evolution is true? Yes, they do. And here's why now all 5 of those reasons are false. Now, this is powerful because our students don't just survive with their faith intact, rather they become agents of change. And so this is why inoculation, not isolation, I believe is one of the key ways that we can help prevent parents who homeschool their kids from sheltering their kids too much. It allows them to be exposed to false ideas, and of course I think that they should do this in a carefully controlled environment in an age-appropriate manner. But nevertheless, when we do this, this could be a very, very powerful tool to helping prevent our kids from both being sheltered too much and from not being prepared to deal with the real world and the real ideas out there that are hostile to the Christian worldview.